The unexpected war in a distant galaxy far beyond the reach of Earth's technology, there was a place where the strongest and most powerful species of the universe met, the Galactic Council. This council controlled the fate of countless civilizations. The representatives were beings from different corners of the cosmos, each with their own unique powers, histories, and technologies. But there was one thing these beings had in common. They all feared humans. It was a quiet fear, the kind that wasn't always openly expressed, but it was there, lurking beneath their perfect facades. They had learned about Earth's history, how the human race had come from nothing, crawling out of the ashes of war and chaos to become something far greater. The aliens knew this was no ordinary species. This was a species that defied all odds, and so, when a single human stepped into the council chamber, the room fell silent. It had begun with a whisper, a story about a lone human named Marcus Carter. Not many had heard of him yet, but those who did knew his name would soon be remembered across the galaxy. Marcus was part of Earth's first diplomatic mission to the stars, and he had been invited to sit in on the Galactic Council's meeting. First, no one took him seriously. After all, how could such a small, fragile species pose a threat to the mighty powers of the galaxy? Humans were still young, their technology rudimentary compared to the advanced species in the room. They were underdogs, and underdogs didn't win in the galaxy. But Marcus Carter was different. As he entered the Galactic Council chamber, all eyes turned toward him. The walls of the room shimmered with holograms depicting scenes of the universe's most powerful fleets. Large alien figures with glowing skin, towering insect-like beings, and sleek, shining robots all stood in a circle, watching him carefully. They had expected a representative of humanity, a politician, a diplomat. Instead, they got a soldier, and a soldier who wasn't afraid. Marcus walked to his seat at the back of the room, his presence imposing despite his small stature. He had no grand speech, no attempt to impress. He simply sat, quietly observing the tension in the air. The room buzzed with an uneasy energy, as though something was about to break. For weeks, the council had been discussing a growing threat in the galaxy, an enemy so dangerous that it had united even the most bitter of species, the Zyrixians, a war-hungry species that had devastated multiple planets in their wake, leaving nothing but ruin behind. Their fleet was massive, their weapons devastating. They were growing stronger by the day, and the council had no clear solution. Then the unexpected happened. A low, rumbling voice echoed through the chamber, cutting through the noise of alien chatter. It was a voice that belonged to one of the oldest members of the council, the wise Zorvok, an ancient species with translucent skin and enormous wings. Zorvok had seen countless empires rise and fall in his time, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was about to say. "We must consider the human approach," Zorvok's voice boomed. The room went dead silent. For a moment, no one moved. The council members, most of whom had spent centuries negotiating the fate of entire galaxies, exchanged nervous glances. Humans were not known for their diplomacy. They were known for something else entirely: violence, conflict, and survival. "Zorvok, you must be joking," a voice from across the room called out. It was Arvax, the leader of the Quran species, a race of highly intelligent but ruthless machines. Humans are not even capable of holding their own in a war against us. Their technology is centuries behind ours. But Zorvok remained unmoved. "It's not their technology we should fear," he said. "It's their resolve. The humans have a spirit we cannot understand. They have survived everything the universe has thrown at them. And now, they're here, the galaxy's growing. Fear." The council members began murmuring among themselves. Many thought Zorvok had lost his mind. How could this small species, with their primitive ways and tendency to fight amongst themselves, be the answer to the galaxy's growing problems? But Marcus remained still, his eyes fixed on the council members as they argued. He wasn't here to prove anything to them. He wasn't here to talk about the might of humanity or the potential of Earth's technology. He was here because humanity had a stake in the galaxy's future, and he was going to ensure they had a place in it. I've heard enough. Marcus spoke. Suddenly, his voice calm but firm. The room instantly froze. Every single alien in the room turned their attention to him, a mix of confusion and curiosity on their faces. The silence was so thick that it felt like a physical presence. Marcus stood up, stepping forward slowly. His eyes burned with an intensity that made even the most hardened alien species feel a chill run down their spines. "You're wrong," he said, his voice echoing across the chamber. "It's not just about resolve. It's about the fact that humans don't stop. Ever. And if you think for 1 second that you can push us into a corner without consequences, you've made a grave mistake." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Some were beginning to look uncomfortable, but others, especially the more powerful species like the Zalvori, looked unimpressed. Marcus continued, undeterred. "We may not have the most advanced weapons, but we have something far more dangerous. We have the will to fight, to survive, to stand up when the rest of the universe has given up. And I'll tell you right now, when humanity makes its stand, it's not just for survival anymore. It's for something far greater." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. "Because," he said quietly, "we have something none of you can ever understand. The will to win." The echo of fear. The room was still, the weight of Marcus's words hanging heavily in the air. The council members, once so full of themselves, now seemed uncertain, unsure of how to react to this human who dared to speak with such authority. They had expected deference, perhaps even awe from the human, but instead, they had received a challenge. And not just any challenge, one that made them question the very core of their beliefs about humanity. For a moment, no one spoke. The quiet was almost suffocating. The council members exchanged uncomfortable glances, each wondering whether they had made a grave mistake by underestimating the human race. But none dared speak first. Finally, it was Zorvok, the ancient being, who broke the silence. His translucent skin shimmered as he slowly rose from his seat, his wings folding neatly behind him. "The human has spoken," Zorvok said, his voice calm yet heavy with age. "And I believe he has a point. We may have underestimated the resilience of humanity. Perhaps it is time we learned more." Arvax, the leader of the Koran, scoffed. "And what exactly do we learn from a species that has barely survived its own planet's wars? We are talking about galactic war, Zorvok. You want to trust these primitives?" But Zorvok's expression remained unwavering. "What has the galaxy learned from its endless wars? We grow stronger, yes, but we have also grown complacent. We've forgotten what it means to fight with true desperation, the kind of desperation that humans know all too well." Arvax looked like he was about to retort, but Marcus spoke again, his voice even softer now but still filled with quiet power. "Zorvok is right," Marcus said, his gaze fixed firmly on the council. "You may have your superior technology, your vast fleets, and your advanced weaponry, but none of that matters when you're fighting for survival. You've never had to fight for your very existence like we have." There was a pause as the council members took in his words. A few began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them had never faced true struggle, not in the way humans had. Marcus took a step forward, his eyes not leaving the council members. "You talk about war as if it's a game, a calculation. But war for humans is something else entirely. It's a fight for everything we've ever known. For our families, for our homes, for our future. That's why we're dangerous. Because we don't fight for honor. We fight to win." The room grew even quieter, if that was possible. The silent hum of the holographic displays in the background seemed louder now. Zorvok nodded slightly, his ancient face unreadable. "And what would you suggest, human?" he asked, his voice thoughtful. "What is it that you want from this council?" Marcus's eyes flicked toward the council chamber's windows, where the stars of distant galaxies twinkled. Then he turned his gaze back to Zorvok and to the rest of the council. "We want to be heard," he said. "Humans have spent too long in the shadows of this galaxy. We've been overlooked, underestimated, and ignored, but we will not be silent anymore. You need humanity on your side in this war against the Xerixians. Whether you accept it or not, we are a force you cannot afford to ignore. The weight of an alliance. The murmurs around the room grew louder. The Quran representative Arvax was visibly agitated, his mechanical hands clenching into fists. This is ridiculous, Arvax said, his voice rising. Why should we risk an alliance with a species that has no proven strength in war? They've only just begun exploring space. Marcus didn't flinch. We may be new to the galaxy, but we fought our way out of impossible situations before. We're not here to beg for your approval. We're here because we're the ones who can make the difference. Another voice, the sleek and graceful Zakar from the Ablovian race, spoke up. His voice was low and melodic, but his words carried weight. Perhaps it's not just about strength, Zakar said thoughtfully. The humans bring something we have not considered, an unpredictability, a wild card, if you will. Something we can't control, but something we need. The council was divided. Some still hesitated, unwilling to risk such a dangerous alliance, with a species they barely understood. Others, however, were intrigued by the possibility of working alongside humans, if only to see if their bold words could match their actions. Finally, it was Zorvok who spoke again, his voice calm but firm. We will vote, but know this, human. If we decide to take you into our fold, it will not be for your strength alone. It will be because we recognize the potential within you, the will to survive, to fight, and perhaps, just perhaps, to lead us out of this war. The council members exchanged nervous glances, and the hum of conversation grew louder. The weight of Zorvok's words settled over them like a shadow. Humanity was no longer a side player. They were a force, and they could not be ignored. Marcus didn't smile, but there was a quiet sense of pride in his eyes. He wasn't here to make friends or sway the council with words. He was here to change the future, and the future was about to change whether the galaxy was ready or not. The council's verdict. The air in the council chamber was thick with tension. The arguments that had filled the room just moments ago had quieted down, replaced by the hum of nervous anticipation. Marcus stood there, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the council members seated around the large, circular table. He could feel their gazes on him, some curious, others skeptical, and a few even fearful. Zorvok had made his point, but the decision was far from certain. Marcus understood that. The Galactic Council had been around for millennia, and in all that time, no species had ever dared to challenge their authority quite like humanity had. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that the Council would not simply roll over and embrace humanity with open arms, but he had planted the seed, and now it was up to the rest of the galaxy to decide if they wanted to see what humanity could truly offer. For what seemed like an eternity, the council members sat in silence. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the final decision to be made. Finally, a voice broke the silence. It was the Zalvori, a tall, regal species with translucent skin that shimmered in the low light. The Zalvori had never been known for their mercy, and their leader, Kaelor, was no different. Her eyes glowed with a faint, otherworldly light, and when she spoke, her voice was cold and measured. I am not convinced, Kaelor said, her gaze fixed on Marcus. Humans may have survived your planet's wars, but that does not make you fit for the galactic stage. You are not the only species to have fought for survival. The Xerixians are not a challenge you can handle. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He had expected this kind of opposition, especially from a species like the Zalvori, who viewed strength and power as the only true measures of worth. He wasn't going to back down now. If you're looking for a species that will simply bow down and accept their fate, Marcus began, his voice steady and unwavering, then maybe you're right. Maybe we're not fit for your council. But if you want a species that will fight no matter the odds, then you've found it. Kaelor's eyes narrowed. The Zalvori were known for their analytical minds and their ability to see through deception. They rarely made mistakes, and they never underestimated an opponent. You speak boldly, human, but words are not enough. We need proof, Kaelor said, her tone colder now. The room grew even quieter, the council members hanging on her every word. I propose a test, Kaler continued, her eyes flicking to the other council members. We are in the midst of a galactic war. The Zyrixians are advancing on the outer rim, threatening the most valuable resources of this galaxy. We need to know if humanity is truly capable of what you claim. If you want to be a part of this council, then you must prove it. The room waited for her next words, a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. I propose a mission, Kaler said, her voice gaining strength. A mission to the front lines of the Zyrixian invasion. We will send a team of council representatives to assess the situation. You, Marcus Carter, will be part of that team. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some of the council members exchanged looks while others were visibly surprised by Kaler's proposal. Marcus met Kaler's gaze, his face betraying no emotion. He knew this was a test, a dangerous one, but it was also his chance to show the galaxy that humanity was more than just a species of survivors. You want me to go to the front lines where the Zyrixians are pushing their forces? Marcus asked, his voice steady though his heart was pounding in his chest. What if I fail? What if humanity fails? Kaler's gaze softened ever so slightly, though her voice remained firm. Failure is not an option. If you cannot prove your worth in the heat of battle, then the galaxy will never trust you. And humanity will be nothing more than a footnote in the history of the galaxy. Marcus felt the weight of her words sink in. He knew that this was the moment where everything could change. If he succeeded, humanity would be seen in a new light. But if he failed, the consequences would be dire. There would be no going back. For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. He was calculating, weighing his options. But in the end, he knew what had to be done. The future of humanity rested on his shoulders. I accept, he said finally, his voice firm and unwavering. The room fell silent once again. It was clear that Kaler had not expected him to agree so quickly, but Marcus didn't hesitate. He wasn't just representing himself anymore. He was representing all of humanity. A soft chuckle escaped from the tall insectoid representative Thrax, a species known for their long exoskeletons and sharp predatory mandibles. Interesting, Thrax mused. A human ready to dive into the heart of a war he knows nothing about. I'll be watching you, Marcus Carter. I'll be ready, Marcus said, his eyes locked on the insectoid creature. Zorvok, who had been quietly observing, spoke again, his voice filled with a rare sense of approval. This will be a defining moment for humanity. But remember, Marcus, we do not trust easily. Prove to us that you and your species are not just capable of surviving, but capable of leading. With that, the council members began to rise from their seats, their murmurs fading as they left the chamber. The decision had been made. Marcus had been given his mission, a chance to prove humanity's worth, not just to the Galactic Council, but to the entire galaxy. But the weight of the task ahead was heavy on his shoulders. The Zyrixians were ruthless, and the front lines were unlike anything he had ever faced before. The test was set, and now Marcus would have to fight harder than he ever had in his life. Into the fire. The Galactic Council had made its decision, and Marcus Carter had accepted the challenge. But now, as he stood in the cold, sterile docking bay of the Council's flagship, the Orion's Dawn, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The gravity of what he had agreed to settled heavily on his shoulders. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew this mission would test him, his team, and humanity's place in the galaxy like never before. The front lines of the Zyrixian invasion were located in the outer rim of the galaxy, a harsh and barren stretch of space where only the most brutal wars had been fought. The Zyrixians had already decimated multiple colonies, and now they were moving toward the more prosperous systems. The Council's fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, and the situation was quickly becoming dire. Marcus glanced around the docking bay. Standing next to him were representatives of the Council, some of the galaxy's most powerful and fearsome species. There was Kaler, the cold and calculating Zalvori leader, who had given the order to send him on this mission. Beside her stood Thrax, the insectoid representative from the Quran, whose body was a mass of exoskeletal plates and sharp, jagged limbs. His many eyes gleamed with a predatory interest as he observed Marcus with unsettling focus. "Ready for your first real battle, human?" Thrax asked, his voice clicking and rasping like the sound of stones grinding together. Marcus met his gaze, without flinching. "I've been ready for a long time," he said. Beside Thrax stood Zakar, the sleek and graceful Iblovian, his dark, flowing form almost invisible against the ship's silver walls. Unlike the others, Zakar had not spoken much during the council's deliberations, but Marcus knew the Iblovians were a race of cunning tacticians and strategists. It was clear they didn't trust humans, but they were willing to give him a chance. "I trust you will not disappoint us, Marcus," Zakar said in his soft, melodic voice, his glowing eyes studying Marcus with an inscrutable expression. "I'm not here to disappoint anyone," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "I'm here to win this fight." The journey to the front lines, the Orion's Dawn, was a ship of immense size, a sleek behemoth designed for both long-distance travel and battle. Its hull gleamed in the light of distant stars as it cut through the vastness of space, heading toward the war zone. Marcus and his team were escorted to a small briefing room where they would receive their mission parameters. The room was stark and utilitarian, the walls lined with holographic maps and tactical data. A large table in the center displayed a 3D projection of the Zyrixian front lines, marked by red flashing dots representing their advancing forces. Kaylor stood at the head of the room, her gaze cold as she addressed the group. "The Zyrixians are advancing at an alarming rate," she began, her voice as sharp as ever. "We believe their next target is the capital world of Zolaris, a planet rich in resources. If they take Zolaris, it will cripple the economy of the entire sector. The Council's fleet is stretched thin, and we have few resources to spare. You will be on the front lines, where the Zyrixian assault is most intense." Marcus studied the map carefully. The situation was grim. The Zyrixians weren't just attacking, they were annihilating everything in their path, leaving nothing but scorched earth and ruined cities behind. "But we can't just fight them head-on," Kaylor continued. "The Zyrixians have superior numbers and firepower. Our objective is to disrupt their supply lines, destroy their forward bases, and gather intelligence on their war strategies. If we can do this, we can weaken them enough to delay their advance." Marcus nodded. "Understood. This mission is a test," Kaylor said, her gaze locking onto Marcus. "Prove that humanity can survive in the heart of a galactic war. Prove that you are more than just a species of survivors. If you fail, you will be a liability. And the Council will have no choice but to leave you to the mercy of the Zyrixians." Marcus felt the weight of her words, but he didn't let it show. This was what he had signed up for. A test not only for him, but for humanity itself. If he failed, here it would be the end of any hope for Earth's future in the galaxy. But if he succeeded, then perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could stand side by side with the galaxy's greatest species, into the heat of battle. The journey to the front lines was quick, but it felt like an eternity. As they neared the war zone, the atmosphere on the ship grew tense. The crew knew that the next few days would be the most dangerous they had ever faced. Marcus stood at the edge of the briefing room, his hands clasped behind his back, preparing himself mentally for what was to come. When the ship finally dropped out of hyperspace, they were greeted by a terrifying sight. The vast expanse of space was dotted with the wreckage of countless ships, some of them council vessels, others Zyrixian. A great battle had already raged here, and it was clear that the Council had been losing ground. The Zyrixians were relentless, their massive warships cutting through the debris like knives through butter. "We're entering the storm now," Kaylor said, her voice unusually grim. "Stay sharp. We're going in hot." Marcus followed the team to the shuttle bay. The shuttle was small, sleek, and designed for quick insertion. The atmosphere inside was heavy with the sound of their breathing, the tension palpable. Thrax seemed unfazed, his many limbs clicking and clacking as he prepared his weapons. Zakar, ever the strategist, was scanning the mission data with an intense focus. As the shuttle launched, the doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. The ship began its descent toward the surface of Zolaris, where the battle raged below. As they descended into the thick clouds of smoke and ash that surrounded the planet's surface, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The scale of this war was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The air was thick with the scent of burning cities, the echoes of battle ringing in the distance. The Zyrixian forces were everywhere, their war machines firing relentlessly at the Council's defensive lines. But there was no turning back now. Marcus clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had a job to do. The shuttle touched down with a violent jolt, and the doors opened. The first thing Marcus noticed was the silence. It was a heavy, oppressive silence broken only by the distant roar of explosions. As the team disembarked, the reality of the situation hit him like a wave. The ground was scorched, the air thick, with smoke, and the smell of death was everywhere. But it didn't matter. Marcus was ready. He stepped forward, his weapon in hand, and led the way into the heart of the battle. The war had begun. Into the heart of the enemy. The ground beneath. Marcus's boots felt like it was burning. The once vibrant world of Zolaris now resembled a lifeless hellscape. The air was thick with the acrid stench of smoke and charred metal, the sky a perpetual twilight as clouds of ash blotted out the sun. The once beautiful cities were reduced to skeletal remains, their towering structures crumbling under the weight of the Zyrixian assault. As Marcus led his team forward, the distant sound of artillery fire and explosions rumbled through the ground, shaking the earth beneath them. His eyes scanned the horizon, nothing but fire, dust, and the eerie silence of a world in its final moments. The Zyrixians had already advanced deep into the planet's surface, and what remained of the Council's defensive forces was scattered and outgunned. Despite the devastation, Marcus didn't hesitate. The mission was clear. They had to infiltrate the Zyrixian lines, disrupt their command center, and gather any intelligence they could on the enemy's next move. The Council was depending on them to turn the tide of the war, and humanity's future in the galaxy rested on their success. Behind him, Kaelor, Thrax, and Zakar moved with swift precision, their faces grim as they observed the battlefield. Thrax's many eyes flicked nervously between the surrounding buildings, his sharp senses on high alert. Zakar, always the tactician, was already calculating their approach. The Zyrixians were ruthless and efficient. This mission would not be easy. "Move out," Marcus commanded, his voice steady. "We're not here for a fight. We're here to find their command center and destroy it." Kaelor nodded, her cold expression betraying no emotion. "The Zyrixians do not take kindly to intruders," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You may find yourself outnumbered, human. Keep your wits about you." Marcus didn't need her warning. He had already faced odds that seemed impossible. But this was different. The Zyrixians were a relentless force, and they were not going to let a small human squad slip past them unnoticed. The challenge ahead was far greater than anything he had ever imagined. The first skirmish, they hadn't gone far when the first signs of the enemy appeared. A low, rumbling hum filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of Zyrixian war machines moving through the dust. Marcus motioned for his team to take cover behind the remains of a collapsed building. The squad melted into the shadows, waiting for the enemy to pass. From their vantage point, Marcus could see them, Zyrixian drones, their sleek armored bodies gliding effortlessly through the rubble. The drones were heavily armed, their weapons capable of leveling entire buildings in seconds. But their greatest strength lay in their numbers. Dozens, maybe hundreds, were scattered across the city, searching for any sign of resistance. Marcus held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment. He could hear the mechanical clicks of the drone's movements getting closer. Each second felt like an eternity. "Stay quiet," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. His eyes never left the advancing drones. He knew that if they were spotted now, there would be no escape. As the drones passed, Marcus exhaled slowly. They had narrowly avoided detection. But he knew that the worst was yet to come. The Zyrixians would never stop searching until they found them, and there were few places left to hide on this devastated world. "We move now," Marcus ordered, his voice steady. "We have to reach the command center before they regroup." The team silently moved through the ruins, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. Every corner, every step, could lead to an encounter with the enemy. The city's broken landscape seemed endless, and each new turn only brought more danger. The command center, after hours of navigating the perilous terrain, they finally reached their destination. The Zyrixian command center was hidden beneath the ruins of an old research facility, camouflaged from the eyes of any enemy who didn't know where to look. It was a massive underground structure, its steel doors reinforced with advanced energy shields. Marcus and his team crouched outside the entrance, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Kaylor's sharp eyes scanned the area, her mind already working through their plan. "We'll need to breach the energy shields before we can get inside," Kaylor said, her voice low and calculating. "The Zyrixians will be expecting a direct assault, so we must find another way in." Marcus glanced at the ruins around them. There was only one way to approach the command center without alerting the entire Zyrixian force: a tunnel system that ran beneath the research facility, though it was poorly mapped and rumored to be filled with traps. "We go in through the tunnels," Marcus said, making the decision quickly. "It's our best shot." Without hesitation, the team moved toward the entrance to the underground network. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and filled with a sense of claustrophobia, but it was their only option. As they descended into the depths, the sounds of the battlefield above them faded, replaced by the eerie silence of the underground, the Zyrixian trap. They hadn't gone far when the first trap was triggered. A faint click echoed in the darkness, followed by a low hum. Before Marcus could react, the tunnel walls on either side exploded with blinding blue energy. A wave of electric shock spread through the air, momentarily incapacitating anyone in its path. Marcus felt his body lock up, his muscles stiffening as the shock wave coursed through him. But it wasn't just the shock. The sound of Zyrixian drones swarming in the tunnels filled his ears. They had walked right into a trap. "We're surrounded," Thrax hissed, his mandibles clicking furiously. "Fall back," Marcus shouted, his voice sharp and commanding despite the pounding in his head. "We need to get out of here, now!" The team scrambled, moving as fast as they could. The Zyrixian drones were closing in, their mechanical legs clanking against the stone floors of the tunnel. It was clear now that they had underestimated their enemy. The Zyrixians had known they were coming, and they had planned accordingly. Marcus grabbed his weapon, firing into the advancing swarm of drones. The shots ricocheted off the hard metal, doing little to slow them down. Kaylor's precise strikes and Zakhar's tactical genius kept them alive, but it was clear that they were running out of time. "More coming from behind," Zakhar shouted, his voice laced with panic. "We have to keep moving." Marcus knew they couldn't hold off the Zyrixians forever. They were too well prepared, too well equipped, but they had no choice but to fight their way through. "Push forward," Marcus yelled. "We can't die here. Humanity doesn't give up." The heart of the Zyrixian beast. The tunnel was a maze of sharp turns, jagged rocks, and the constant hum of Zyrixian drones in pursuit. The sudden onslaught had thrown the team into chaos. Marcus could feel the electric burn still tingling in his body from the shockwave. But there was no time to dwell on it. They had to survive. They had to find a way out. "Move, move, move!" Marcus barked, his voice hoarse but filled with urgency. He ran ahead, weapon in hand, scanning every corner for enemy movement. Thrax, the towering insectoid warrior, was right behind him, his many limbs moving with surprising grace for his size. Kyler, the cold and calculating Zalvori leader, moved like a shadow, her gaze ever watchful as she kept an eye on the rear. Zakhar, the Oblovian strategist, was already analyzing their escape route, his glowing eyes flicking between the walls of the narrow tunnel. Despite their swift movements, Marcus could hear the unmistakable clank of Zyrixian drones gaining on them. The narrow tunnel provided little cover, and the drones were relentless, their targeting systems honed and deadly. The last thing Marcus needed right now was to lose his footing. The darkness of the tunnel seemed to swallow them whole, and the only light was the flicker of their weapons blasters firing at the oncoming drones. "We need to reach the surface," Marcus shouted, but the words felt empty in the face of the growing dread pressing in around them. The collapse of hope. The tunnel opened up into a wider, abandoned chamber deep beneath the surface of the planet. The sound of their footsteps echoed as they took refuge behind a collapsed pillar. The glow of the drone's weapons illuminated the edges of the chamber, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Marcus's heart was racing. The team was close to exhaustion, but they couldn't afford to stop. The Zyrixians were closing in too quickly. The chamber they were in was their last hope for making it out alive. Thrax hissed as he looked over his shoulder. "They're almost here. We don't have much time." Zakar was already calculating their next move, his fingers tapping on his wrist gauntlet. "There's another passage leading to the surface, but it's a long shot. The entrance is on the far side of this chamber. We'll need to move quickly." "Then let's move," Marcus said, his voice tight. There was no time for hesitation. They had to take the chance. The final stand as the team moved to the far side of the chamber. The sound of the drones grew louder. Marcus could feel the tension in the air. This would be the moment that determined whether they lived or died. "On my mark," Marcus whispered, taking a deep breath. "We make a break for it." The countdown began in his mind. 3, 2, 1. Bolted toward the exit, firing his blaster in quick bursts at the advancing drones. The others followed suit. Thrax's exoskeleton was a blur of movement as he swung his weapons, cutting down drones with precise strikes. Kalor's energy blades flashed in the dim light as she sliced through the enemy's defenses with deadly efficiency. Zakar darted ahead, his body shifting like liquid to avoid the drone's fire. The team was moving as one, their unity and coordination on full display. But the Zyrixians weren't backing down. They were everywhere. The drones closed in from all sides, and Marcus knew they couldn't keep this up for much longer. The entrance to the surface was within reach, but it was guarded by a force field, and the power was already flickering. Marcus's pulse quickened. They had to deactivate the field before the drones overwhelmed them. "Cover me," Marcus shouted. Sprinting to the control panel on the far side of the entrance, Kalor moved to cover him, firing her energy blades at the drones that were closing in. Thrax was cutting through enemy lines, creating a temporary opening, while Zakar positioned himself strategically to take down any drones trying to flank them. Marcus reached the control panel and quickly began working on the deactivation sequence. His hands flew over the buttons, his mind racing. The power was weak, but he was managing to break through the encryption. "Just a few more seconds," Marcus muttered under his breath, sweat dripping down his forehead. The drones were getting closer. They were almost out of time. The great escape. With a final click, the force field sputtered and fell silent. The entrance opened, and Marcus could see the night sky beyond. They were so close, but the Zyrixians weren't about to let them go that easily. A massive blast of energy rang out from behind him, and Marcus felt the ground shake violently as one of the drones fired a direct shot. He staggered but didn't fall. The others were right behind him, and together they sprinted toward the opening. "Move!" Thrax's voice rang out, fierce and full of adrenaline. Just as they reached the opening, another volley of blasts exploded behind them, kicking up debris and sending rocks flying. A piece of the tunnel collapsed, blocking the path. They were trapped. "Go. Now!" Marcus yelled, throwing himself forward into the night sky. The moment they cleared the surface entrance, the sound of the Zyrixian attack faded, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. They had made it. But at what cost? The Zyrixians were relentless. They knew where they were now. On the surface, the team emerged onto the surface of Zolaris, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burning. The once beautiful planet had now become a battlefield, its landscape scarred by the war that raged across it. But there was no time to stop and take in the devastation. The mission wasn't over yet. They had to find the command center, the heart of the Zyrixian invasion. Looking up, Marcus could see the faint glint of Zyrixian warships in the sky. descending like vultures to finish the job they had started. "We need to move fast," Zakar said, his voice cold as ever. "The longer we stay exposed, the more likely we are to be targeted." Marcus nodded. "Let's go. No turning back." They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded on all sides. But for the first time since the war began, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt before: hope. The Xyrixians had underestimated humanity's resilience. They thought that one lone human sitting in the council room was nothing to fear. They were wrong. The heart of the Xyrixian command, the surface of Zolaris, was far from the paradise it had once been. The air was thick with the smoke of battle, and the once green fields were now barren, scorched earth. The Xyrixians' war machines dotted the horizon, their glowing weapons cutting through the gloom like stars in a darkened sky. But Marcus wasn't concerned with the war around him. His focus was fixed solely on the task at hand, reaching the heart of the Xyrixian invasion and ending this war before it spread any further. He could feel the weight of the mission on his shoulders. Humanity was relying on him, on all of them. They couldn't fail now, not when they were so close. As Marcus led his team through the smoking ruins, their every step was calculated. Kaylor moved ahead, her keen eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any threat. Thrax, as always, kept a watchful eye on the rear, his insectoid senses alert to every movement. Zakar's glowing eyes never stopped calculating their next moves, always one step ahead of the enemy. The city had been reduced to rubble, the once proud buildings now nothing more than skeletal remains. The Xyrixians had clearly been here, for a long time. This wasn't just an invasion, it was an occupation, a thorough one, designed to break the spirit of any who dared resist. "Keep moving," Marcus urged, his voice tight. The closer they got to the heart of the invasion, the more dangerous it became. Zakar suddenly halted, his arm raised in a silent gesture to stop. The others froze, their muscles tensed. "Something's wrong," Zakar muttered, his voice cold and calculating. "We're being watched." Marcus scanned the horizon. The darkened sky was filled with Xyrixian warships, their sleek forms darting through the clouds like predators circling their prey. Below, the streets were eerily silent, too silent. The wind picked up, howling through the skeletal remains of the city. The crackling of distant explosions filled the air, but in this area, there was an unsettling calm. "We're not the only ones here," Kaylor said quietly, her voice as sharp as ever. "The Xyrixians have laid traps. We can't keep going like this." Marcus's eyes narrowed. He had known this would happen eventually. The enemy had been aware of their presence for far too long. They had to be close, too close, to the core of the invasion for it to be a coincidence. "Then we break through," Marcus said, his resolve hardening. "We don't stop, we push forward." The Xyrixian ambush without warning, the calm was shattered. A shrill mechanical screech rang out through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of Xyrixian drones descending from above. The trap had been sprung. The Xyrixians' drones swarmed from all sides, their glowing eyes fixed on Marcus and his team. They moved with precision, their armored bodies moving like a tidal wave of metal, guns raised, ready to fire. "Get down," Marcus shouted as he dropped to a crouch, his weapon raised. Kaylor was already moving, her body a blur as she engaged the first wave of drones. Her blades flashed in the dim light, cutting through metal and sparks. Thrax's powerful limbs lashed out, sending drones flying with a single swipe. Zakar darted in and out of cover, launching strikes with pinpoint accuracy. But the drones kept coming, and the enemy numbers were overwhelming. Each one seemed to be stronger, faster, and more deadly than the last. Marcus knew they wouldn't last long if they didn't do something drastic. "Thrax, Kaylor, cover the left flank. Zakar, with me. We need to get to that command center now," Marcus shouted. Thrax growled, his mandibles clicking with excitement. "Understood. Let's show these tin cans who they're dealing with." The team sprang into action, splitting up as Marcus and Zakar headed toward the command center's coordinates. The noise of battle erupted all around them, but the sound of gunfire was quickly drowned out by the roar of engines above them. The warships. They weren't just watching anymore. They were preparing to strike. The final pushes. They neared the entrance to the Zyrixian command center. The battlefield grew more chaotic. The air was filled with explosions, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Marcus's heart raced. This was it, the final moment. They were either going to change the tide of the war, or die trying. "We're almost there," Zakar said, his voice grim. "But we've got incoming, multiple ships. The Zyrixians are escalating." Marcus clenched his jaw. The warships were closing in, their cannons primed for a devastating bombardment. "We're not stopping now," Marcus growled. "We fight to the end." They reached the entrance to the command center, an enormous steel door reinforced with Zyrixian technology. It was heavily guarded by drones, but the team wasted no time. Thrax and Kalor arrived, at their side, slamming into the remaining defenses with brutal force. Marcus didn't wait for the others to clear the way. He ran forward, his blaster raised, and fired at the control panel on the door. Sparks flew, and the door's energy shield sputtered and cracked. "Cover me," Marcus shouted. The sound of plasma fire erupted as Zakar, Thrax, and Kalor moved to hold off the drones. Marcus's heart pounded as he slammed his hand against the door's control system, his fingers flying across the interface. He could feel the Zyrixians closing in. The warships were nearly in range. The countdown was on. Come on," Marcus muttered as the system flickered and sparked in front of him. Finally, with a loud thud, the door's energy shield dropped. The massive steel door groaned and slowly began to slide open. "We're in," Marcus shouted. Before they could even breathe, the command center inside was revealed. But the space they'd entered wasn't what they expected. The room was a labyrinth of high-tech consoles, glowing red lights, and alien machinery. But what caught their attention wasn't the layout of the room. It was the enormous holographic map of the galaxy projected in the center. And standing before it, in the heart of the command center, was a single figure. The Zyrixian commander. The figure was tall, its form shrouded in shadow. The figure stepped forward, revealing a being far more advanced than any of the drones they had faced. A true Zyrixian commander. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its voice was like a low, menacing growl. "You think you can stop us?" The Zyrixian commander spoke, its voice reverberating through the chamber. "Your species is nothing. We are the future. We are the true rulers of this galaxy." Marcus's grip tightened on his blaster. This was the leader, the one pulling the strings. This was the heart of the invasion. "No," Marcus said, his voice steady. "You may control this galaxy for now, but we're here to remind you that humans are not to be underestimated." The commander smiled, its expression cold. "We'll see how long your human spirit can endure." The final stand. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone. Marcus's breath came in shallow gasps as his eyes locked on the towering form of the Zyrixian commander. The room around him was like a twisted, futuristic war zone, every wall humming with alien energy. But none of it mattered. There was only one thing left to do: survive. The Zyrixian commander stood there, silent for a moment, its glowing eyes boring into Marcus. The holographic map of the galaxy flickered above them, a cruel reminder of how close the Zyrixians were to victory. The Zyrixian war machine was everywhere. Yet standing in the center of their command center, it was clear that the commander saw Marcus and his team as nothing more than a brief inconvenience. But Marcus wasn't about to let that slide. "We didn't come here to talk," he said coldly, his grip tightening on his blaster. "We came here to end this war." The commander's smile was slow, deliberate. It was the kind of smile you'd expect from someone who knew they had already won. "You are far too arrogant for your own good, human," the commander said, its voice like grinding stone. "You think your species is strong? You think you can defeat an empire like mine? You are nothing, an insect, scurrying in the shadow of giants." Marcus's heart thundered in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "We're not insects, we're humanity. and we've beaten worse than you." Without warning, the commander's body shifted, and in an instant it was surrounded by a shimmering, translucent energy shield. The shield was a brilliant blue, reflecting off the dim light of the command center. Marcus glanced at his team. Kaylor was already preparing her energy blades, her eyes narrowing as she calculated their next move. Thrax's claws clicked together eagerly, the insectoid warrior clearly excited for the battle ahead. Zakar, ever the tactician, was studying the commander's shield with intense focus. "We need to disable that shield," Zakar said. "It's the only thing protecting him." "Then we take it down," Marcus responded with grim determination. Fine. Battle unfolds. The first move came from Thrax. The towering warrior charged with a roar, his multi-limbed body a blur of motion. He threw himself into the air with surprising agility for his size, launching a series of rapid strikes at the commander's shield. The impact was loud, like a hammer hitting metal, but the shield barely shuddered. The Zyrixian commander's gaze never wavered. It stood there watching as if enjoying the spectacle. "Foolish," the commander hissed, and in an instant the shield flared brighter, sending a shockwave through the room. Thrax was thrown backward, crashing into a pillar, his armor sparking and smoking from the powerful energy blast. "Thrax!" Kaylor shouted, moving forward to check on the warrior. He groaned but was still alive, his exoskeleton damaged but intact. "We need another plan," Marcus said, his mind racing. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Zakar stepped forward, his glowing eyes scanning the room. "I may be able to disable the shield's core if I can get close enough," Marcus nodded. "Then we create a distraction. Kaylor, cover Zakar. Thrax, you and I will hold off the commander." Without waiting for a response, Marcus sprinted forward, firing his blaster as he went. The Zyrixian commander retaliated, immediately launching a torrent of energy blasts toward him. Marcus dove behind a piece of broken machinery, narrowly avoiding the deadly beams. The heat from the blast seared the air around him, and the energy left an acrid taste in his mouth. "Keep it together, Marcus," Kaylor shouted from behind cover. "We've got this." Marcus nodded, his eyes steely with resolve. He glanced over to Thrax, who was back on his feet and charging again. Together they made a move for the commander, forcing the alien to split its attention between them and Zakar. Zakar, meanwhile, was already weaving through the chaos, his lithe form darting between pillars and wreckage. His fingers danced over his wrist gauntlet as he calculated the best approach to the shield's core. "Almost there," Zakar muttered to himself, sweat beading on his forehead. He was close. He could feel it. The turning point Marcus's pulse was thundering in his ears as he and Thrax pressed forward, the Zyrixian commander blocking every shot, its shield flaring with each attack. The commander's voice was mocking, like the clinking of chains. "Your resistance is futile. Do you not see? You are doomed." Marcus's teeth ground together. He couldn't afford to hear the commander's taunts. The Zyrixians had tried to break humanity for too long, but Marcus knew one thing for certain. Humans never gave up. Not when it mattered. Not when it was the last fight. And this was the last fight. Just as the commander prepared to launch another devastating blast, a voice broke through the noise. "Now!" Zakar's voice rang out just as a loud, crackling sound echoed through the room. The energy shield surrounding the commander flickered and went dark, sparking wildly before it collapsed entirely. Marcus wasted no time. He leaped forward, firing his blaster with precision. The Zyrixian commander tried to raise a hand to defend itself, but it was too late. The blaster fire pierced through its alien armor, and the commander staggered back, its glowing eyes dimming. The room fell silent for a moment. The Zyrixian commander's body crumpled to the floor, defeated. The final blow had been struck. Aftermath. The command center was eerily quiet now. The hum of energy and the soft crackle of sparks from the fallen machinery were the only sounds. In the room, Marcus stood over the fallen commander, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. "We did it," Kaylor said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Thrax stepped forward, his mandibles clicking with pride. "You were right, human. We made it through. Zakar's glowing eyes surveyed the room. The Zyrixians have lost their leader. Their army will crumble. Without him, the galaxy will know that humanity is not to be trifled with. Marcus nodded, but there was no joy in his eyes. This is just the beginning. The Zyrixians will be back and we need to be ready. But today we proved something. Humanity is no longer the underdog. We can and will fight back. Kaelor raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Marcus's eyes hardened with resolve. This war isn't over, but humanity? We're here to stay.